When I approached the gate of the big house, I was so nervous that I was literally vibrating. I didn't know how they would perceive my appearance, or even if they would even see me, but I knew that I had returned home. I thought they might be surprised or just curious, but really, who knew? I never in my life thought that I would try to come back here again. It didn't make any sense, but I knew this was where I belonged. Probably, by my age, I'm 24, a woman should already know where her place is in life. Heck, rich city girls go to college at 18 with their career plans firmly in place. So if you judge me by their standards, I'm a little late. On the other hand, if you judge me not by career standards, but by life experience, I am ahead of them, because I got married as soon as I was young, and my husband and I had our own home. Okay, it was his house. And yes, it was a trailer. And yes, he was 40 then, but that was the only life I knew. Every girl I knew wanted the same thing. We wanted to get out of our parents' houses and get married, so we could be responsible for ourselves and not have to endure their devilry. We wanted to make our own rules and make our own decisions. Sure, most of us understood that technically our husbands would be in charge, but our husbands were men. Men were the easiest to control, especially for a mountain girl. I think technically most of us were first or second generation from mountain people. But that didn't change anything. Men could still be controlled simply by offering them some sex at the right time, and hell, that's what many of us wanted to do anyway. So I married Zeke because he was my dad's friend, and he was always kind to me. I settled into the role of Zeke's trailer queen, or so I thought. Once the honeymoon was over, I got a huge dose of reality. It turned out that adult life is not so simple, and Zeke was not Prince Charming at all. Adult life was not what I imagined. I always thought that you can do whatever you want, whenever you want. No, everything turned out to be completely different. There were so many things I had to do. There were so many expectations from me, and this despite the fact that we didn't even have a job. Zeke was one of the lucky ones. He was the king of the trailer park because he was on disability. This meant that Zeke was getting paid for not working. All Zeke had to do was sit on his butt and wait for the check to come. Zeke was damn smart. He was one of 3 brothers who worked in the warehouse. Well, they pretended to work in a warehouse. In fact, they voluntarily agreed to work the night shift. Night workers received a so-called shift bonus. This meant that they received more money for the same work because night shifts were considered less profitable. In practice, this meant that they were left to their own devices most of the night because their bosses went home at 7 in the evening after starting their assignments. In fact, they worked for about an hour until the boss left, and then they got out the beer and stopped working until there was an hour left before the end of their shift. Then one night, while Zeke and his brothers were sitting on a rack in the warehouse, drinking beer and listening to a baseball game, waiting for the boss to leave, a new Lyft driver accidentally knocked a pallet of parts right onto them. The warehouse manager was just walking towards them when this happened, so he saw everything. There were a lot of boxes with small parts on that pallet, and the brothers were knocked off their feet. By the time the boss got to them, Zeke had shown his intelligence. His 2 brothers quickly stood up to show that they were okay. I guess they didn't want the boss to know they were drinking beer at work. Zeke took this moment to show how smart he was. When the boss looked at him, he said 3 words. Those same 3 words that, like Einstein's theory of relativity, haunted him his whole damn life. These 3 words have become legendary in our trailer park. Zeke looked at the boss and said, "Oh, my back." The rest is history, and Zeke has been getting paid ever since. Nothing was ever wrong with Zeke. Zeke still hunts and fishes and fights all the other jerks around, but every 6 months he goes to the doctor and complains about pain in his back and sides. The pain has now become so severe that doctors prescribe Zeke medicine, which he gets for free thanks to his disability, and then sells to people in the trailer park. One of my responsibilities, like every good wife, is to make sure Zeke never runs out of beer. That's why I make daily, if not more frequent, trips to the 7 to ensure we always have beer in our refrigerator. One morning Zeke kicked me awake and glared at me. When I opened my eyes, I looked into his angry, unshaven face, wondering why he kicked me. "No beer, girl," he barked irritably. "Seriously, why the hell did I marry you? You don't have much to do. How the hell did you let the beer run out?" "I don't drink it," I blurted out without thinking. He hit me. I stood up and put my feet into my old slippers. She pulled on her jeans, threw on an old t-shirt, and walked out through the open door. I exited the trailer and walked down onto the concrete block that served as a step. It was already more than 80 degrees outside. It was darker inside the trailer, and a fan circulated the hot air so it seemed cooler. I carefully jumped over the mud that always accumulated around the trailer in the warmer months and walked away. 7 was almost a mile away, and I wanted to get back before the sun rose fully and began to bake me. As I walked through the park to the road, I waved and nodded to many neighbors. Those who were more or less wealthy sat in their trailers and watched TV. Those who were not so well off sat on their verandas and watched people. I felt their gaze on me as I walked past. Some of them wanted to talk, but I didn't have time. I saw that several older men were unhappy that I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt. They loved to look at young girls in t-shirts and shorts. I think I'm pretty for a girl from the lower classes. I still have all my teeth in place, and they are in good condition. My hair is long and thick, golden in color. This is not a blonde and a brunette, something in between. At 5'2", I'm just the right height for a girl. Not too low and not too high. I have average breast size, and as my grandmother always said, more than a handful is in vain. I also have good hips and a nice ass for my size. I think everything on my body is average size. Average is good. This means not too big and not too small. I'm right in the middle. Usually, when something good is more than normal, you have to pay for it. Susie Smith has the biggest breasts in the trailer park, but she also has the biggest belly and flattest ass you've ever seen. Some guys around here joke about it all the time. Zeke always talks about how he tried to slap her on the butt one time and his hand slipped and didn't stop until he hit the floor with it. He said there was no difference between her back and her ass. Others said she was physically unable to use the chair because it didn't bend until you reached her knees. Even her father, who was a carpenter and a good one, said that he used Susie's back and legs as a plumb line to level walls and fences. Even with Susie's huge breasts, she never had a permanent boyfriend. Guys just come, stare at her breasts, and then go fishing or do something else. So maybe the average isn't so bad. As I walked along the road, the closer I got to the highway, the more cars there were. A couple of guys whistled at me as they drove by. I thought that when I returned home, there would be a mark on my face. But it was my fault for not holding my tongue. I guess I grew up in a place where such things were the norm. My dad loved my mom terribly much. Unlike many people around us, neither of them has ever cheated on the other. Dad loved Mom too much to do this, and Mom was too afraid. I often saw my dad disciplining my mom for going beyond the boundaries, and Dad always told us that respect is sometimes all a poor person has. So if Mom said something at the wrong time or was disrespectful, it was his duty to show her that she was wrong. The parking lot at 7 was already full that morning. They really needed a drive-through line like those fancy fast food places. There were no free parking spaces, so cars stood on top of each other in the aisles. I saw a lot of nice cars and trucks in the parking lot that morning. I stopped and looked at them. I imagined that one of them belonged to me and that I was driving away from my life in this damn trailer park. Then I laughed, noticing how full the store was from the inside. And then suddenly my brain turned on, and I realized that with such a crowd in the store, there was a real possibility that the beer might run out. I stopped dreaming and went inside. Zeke wasn't happy with me this morning. If I came home without a beer, things would get worse. I pushed my way into the crowded store and made my way through the crowd to the back where the drink coolers were. Judging by the way the store was set up, you could tell they really wanted you to buy their expensive vending machine drinks and slushies. Beer and branded soft drinks were at the very back of the store. When I walked to the refrigerator, I realized I was in trouble. Zeke only drank Shot's beer. The entire area of the refrigerator that held Schott's beer was empty, except for 2 individual bottles. I knew that if I came home with less than a box, I would be in trouble. I quickly looked around the refrigerator to see if the workers had moved the beer to another location. "Hello, Victoria," said a voice behind me. I turned around and saw the face, if you can call it that, of Chester Crawdad. Chester and I went to school together. Since childhood, he was the most disgusting guy I knew. Chester has been very kind to me over the last couple of weeks. On the one hand, I wanted to think that maybe he had matured, but on the other, I noticed that his kindness began around the time I stopped wearing a coat because the weather became too warm. That day, I was willing to let Chester touch me, or even look at me if it would save me from getting hit by Zeke for coming home without a beer. "Perhaps today is your lucky day, beauty," Chester said in that voice that was reserved for crazy people. "And perhaps today is also my lucky day," he said in the same voice. I tried to hide my disgust as I answered. "How can this be our lucky day, Chester?" I asked, as if I didn't understand. "Because there might be a case of shots hidden in the back of the store just for you to buy." He smiled ultra nasty. "Okay, bring it," I said. "Meet me at the cash register." "Not so fast," he said. "It will only make your day happy." "What about mine?" "Damn it, Chester," I sighed. "Could you do this just out of kindness? Could you do this as a gesture of friendship?" "When the hell were we friends?" He grinned. "And kindness. Victoria, I am the kind one. This world is not a kind place at all, but he can become one. I do something kind for you, and in return you do something kind for me. And then the whole damn world becomes kinder." "Okay, Chester," I said resignedly. "How kind should I be?" He came closer to me and whispered in a voice that was loud enough for me to hear. "I want." "Well, I'm not going to do it here," I replied sharply. I knew Chester only wanted to touch. I realized that Chester was afraid to ask for something more. "Of course not here," he replied. "Just follow me to the back of the store like we're going for your beer. It's just me and the manager, and he's so busy at the register that he won't even notice." I nodded and followed him through the door marked "Employees Only." It wasn't like I was cheating on Zeke. Heck, Zeke often asked me to show his friends something, or even let them have a little more if it would help him. Chester muttered to himself as we entered the relatively quiet, employees-only area. "You're not so damn arrogant now, are you?" he said. "But you really thought I wanted to touch, didn't you? You are nothing. When this is all over, the women where I'm going will make you and all those other trailer park prostitutes look like crap." I couldn't understand him, and by the time I realized I was in danger, it was already too late. When I followed Chester to the beer box, someone made me pass out because of a pile of boxes. The last thing I remembered was Chester's smiling face, but his smile was somehow wrong. Man, today was that day. Today was that day. This was the beginning of a long journey, which I hope will be the beginning of a new life. In the last 5 years, since I left the service, well, since I sorted out a small problem that I discovered after returning home, I have mainly focused on growing the family business. I've hired or tried to hire many other guys like me who served and came home only to experience heartache or indifference. So now I had a group of dedicated employees who, when a crisis struck, were willing to do almost anything for me. And now there was a crisis. I was so alone that it was almost physical. What's the point of doing everything I can to help my community if I come back to a big empty house every night? People are simply not meant to be alone. Loneliness is as deadly as cancer and just as insidious. It eats you away from the inside until all you are left with is a shell of the person you once were. My problem was that, like many others, what I discovered when I returned home destroyed my ability to trust most people. So I couldn't just sign up for some dating site and let them find me the perfect partner. This is all complete nonsense. Every time I saw these commercials, I burst out laughing. But laughing, I continued to feel my loneliness. Throughout history, men have found women in many different ways, who said that our current model is the best and only possible. Why don't I follow the example of the caveman? Why don't I just take a club and whack some woman over the head and then drag her back to my cave? What about the Native Americans or the Vikings or so many of the early Europeans? Why don't I just grab the woman I want? At some level, I knew that what I was proposing was wrong. I knew there were laws against it and many moral reasons why it was wrong. But at the same time, I knew that with my trust issues, this was probably the only way I wouldn't be alone. The first step was to plan everything, including the escape route. The beauty of our so-called enlightened society is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. If you have enough money, you can do almost anything with impunity. I set about creating a completely different identity for myself. It turned out to be not so difficult. Through friends who were still serving, I met and became friends with other people working in various government agencies, and soon I had two identities. In case my plan failed, I had a completely different personality that I could go into and disappear into the crowd. After the planning stage and creating an escape route, I needed to find the perfect target. I followed the women for several weeks and narrowed the selection down to 3. This stage was easy because I chose them based on attractiveness and personality. So any woman who was not personally attracted to me was simply excluded from further investigation. Of these 3, I excluded one because she really loved her husband. There were 2 left, and one of them was unmarried. Another had been married for no more than a few years, and apparently was not only in a state of shock from her marriage, but her husband sometimes beat her. I still chose a single woman because to me marriage was marriage. Even after what happened to me, I didn't want to ruin anyone else's marriage. Her name was Elsa, and she lived just a few miles from me. She was some kind of nurse's assistant, and she didn't look bad. I arranged for her to be monitored 24/7 to create an exact schedule of when and where she would be at any given moment of the day. And then everything collapsed. She was fired, which at first I took as a plus. But then we found out why she was fired. She was fired for stealing medicine from the hospital. She didn't sell them. She accepted them in large quantities. I'm not attracted to addicted girls, so I started to take a closer look at another woman. My opinion has changed. My loneliness may have turned to despair, but I began to make excuses for why being married to a man who beats you isn't really a marriage. I woke up this morning knowing that my life was going to change today, for better or for worse. I smiled because this was not the first thought of this kind. The first time I thought this was in a small church in Michigan where our friends and family had gathered to watch me marry my high school sweetheart. I think in some way every man who brings a woman into his life feels the same way. One way or another, my life will change today, for better or for worse. I went to work this morning as usual. I may have been a little nervous, but I tried to maintain a semblance of normality. I think I succeeded until the call came. I was sitting at a table with several managers from different departments in my building when my assistant walked in and announced that the deal had gone through. I immediately apologized and went home. Driving was usually a pleasure for me. I can afford almost any car I want. But when I was a kid, I became addicted to classic muscle cars. I drove a 2012 Shelby GT 500 Mustang. I love this car, but today it was just a means of getting from point A to point B. As I pulled into my neighborhood and slowed down as the road wound through manicured lawns and landscaped gardens, the 500-plus horsepower engine hummed muffled and menacing. I waved to a few neighbors before pulling into my long, circular driveway. I entered the house with a casual air. A man and woman about my age walked through the front door. The man looked at me and simply nodded. "Everything went smoothly, without complications," he said. I followed them into the kitchen. I opened the door to a large storage room. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined both sides of the pantry, filled with groceries and kitchen utensils. The back wall was decorated with large and small shiny frying pans hanging on hooks. Everything in this room served one purpose. If you asked most people, they would say it's for cooking, but it's not. The entire pantry was a passageway. Floor-to-ceiling shelves concealed hinges. The entire back wall swung open easily when I opened the locks using the garage-style remote control. I walked down a short flight of stairs and stood in front of a massive door. I opened it and went inside. These two large doors were mechanically linked so that only one of them could open at a time. Behind the door was a very large room. It was larger than most apartments. It had its own large bathroom and even a small kitchen. There, lying on the bed, apparently asleep, was a young woman. She was very beautiful, but she seemed unaware of it. She was 4 years younger than me, and although she didn't understand it either, she now belonged to me. Zick. I turned to Rab to express my displeasure. "Where the hell is she?" I asked. "This bitch left almost an hour and a half ago. It doesn't take that long to get to the 7 and buy beer." "Why are you asking me?" He grumbled. "She is your wife, not mine." He looked around for something to spit the tobacco into. Not finding anything suitable, he simply went outside and spat on the ground. He then sat down on a concrete block that served as a step. "Damn, it's hot in here," he said. "Maybe she collapsed with heat stroke while trying to carry the beer back. You probably should have gone yourself, or at least given her your car." "After the way she snapped at me this morning," I spat. "She's lucky I didn't knock out her teeth. This bitch ungrateful for everything I gave her. I told you from the very beginning that Victoria was not the girl for you, Zeke," he said. "She read too many books as a child. Those damn books were messing with her head. They gave her all sorts of ideas. I told you from the very beginning that the best of my sisters is Tammy. She's named after Tammy Wynette, so if there's one thing she knows how to do, it's stand behind her man." "Tammy's ass is too fat," I said. "Damn it, when you get Victoria pregnant, her ass will blur too," Rab laughed, "but it will also calm her down a little. When you put a baby in her belly, she will understand her place in this world." "Damn it, I never stopped trying," I said, "but I'm not as young as I used to be." Zeke," Rab said. "We need to talk, seriously." I felt the hairs on my neck stand on end, but I still nodded my head. "Zeke, my dad was your best friend, so you're almost like family," he began. "I don't know how to say this exactly. This is a very delicate situation, but that's why I mentioned Tammy earlier. They always say that God will give us the solution to our problems. They also say that a man's home is his castle, right?" I nodded, but glanced at Rab, trying to figure out what he was getting at. "Zeke, maybe you're not the problem," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Do you and Victoria often have sex?" he asked. "Probably not as often as I would like," I replied. "But the old log regularly rolls into the barn, whether you like it or not." "And that's exactly the point, brother-in-law," he said. "She should have already given birth to at least a couple of children for you, if not more." "That's right," I said. "And you're clearly not getting your share from Victoria, but you refuse to beat her," he said. "You are too kind to this girl, and doubly so," he said. I nodded in agreement. "But a man needs to relieve tension somehow, Zeke," he continued. "It's written somewhere in the Bible, so no one will judge you if you go outside to scratch an itch." He looked into my eyes, and I blinked. "I thought so," he said. "And I also think, or at least I have a suspicion, that you did it with family in mind, didn't you?" "I think so," I said. "Sorry, Rab, but I—" He raised his hand to silence me. "Zeke, no one is complaining. You get what you need. Tammy, who has been alone since Danny left and died in Iraq, is as happy as a pig in mud, and until recently no one even knew." I nodded, expecting but to come next. "But," he said, as if ordered, "something is approaching." My heart sank. "And that something is Tammy's growing belly, because fat ass or not, you gave birth to the wrong sister." It made me think that maybe the problem with you and Victoria isn't you. Maybe my little sister just can't have children. I mean, you've been married for 5 damn years, and even if, as you say, she doesn't like having sex, something should have happened by now. I nodded my head. "Damn, it's a shame your father is no more," I said. "He was a man of honor. If he sold you a bad pig, he would fix it and—" He raised his hand again. "I'll fix that too," he said, "but it's not as easy as with pigs. My father would have given you another pig." He thought for a moment. "This is it," he said. "You can take Tammy too." "What?" I asked. You are legally married to Victoria, but we all know there are problems there. Now you might as well go through all the hassles of divorce and litigation because, essentially, you shouldn't put up with her antics. To endure them for so many years for the sake of a woman whose insides are broken is almost sacred, but if you divorce her, you will have to give her half of your property. It's cheaper to leave it that way. But just take Tammy too. What? I asked again. Look at it this way, he said. Victoria doesn't like sex. Tammy loves it. Victoria, apparently, cannot get pregnant and give birth to your children. So she's pretty much useless other than standing around and looking pretty, and even then you have to put up with her sharp tongue, right? So take Tammy too, he continued. That way you have the best of both worlds. You will have one woman for show and one for business. Move Tammy to your bedroom and Victoria to the sofa. Hell, you'll even have someone to watch all those kids you make Tammy. He patted me on the shoulder and smiled. I'll leave it to you to tell them, he said. Don't worry about Tammy, she completely agrees. But Victoria still needs to be taught a lesson. Damn, such thoughts make me thirsty. Where's the beer? After 2 hours, our mood went from annoyed to angry to damn depressed. Let's go find her, he said. I nodded again. We hopped in my Dodge Ram pickup and headed to the 7. The heat was already so hot that you could have fried an egg on the road, and we didn't have a drop of beer. Victoria was clearly trying to kill me. I searched the entire store, and there was plenty of beer, but no Victoria. I grabbed a case of Schott's beer from the refrigerator. It wasn't very cold, so it was probably put there recently. When I got to the register, I saw this stupid guy behind the counter. I think his name was Chester or something like that. He studied with Victoria at school and was always in love with her. Chester, what time did Victoria leave here? I asked. He looked at me with a blank expression. Did Victoria come here? He asked, smiling. Before I mentioned my stupid wife, the guy was focused on his work and didn't even look in my direction. But now he looked like he'd be happy to get anything for a little information about that hapless fool. Chester, she should have been here and come home 3 times already, I said. He shook his head sharply. Victoria didn't come here. If she was there, I would have seen her, he smiled. Hey, Harlan, he shouted to the old man, who looked bored. Harlan approached us. How can I help you, gentlemen? He asked in a tired voice. Was Victoria here this morning? Chester asked. Who? Asked Harlan. Well, you know Victoria, the woman I'm talking about. Chester began. Oh, that pretty blonde you always talk about. Harlan laughed. How should I know? So many people passed through this store today that I can barely remember which trucks came through, let alone the specific women I'm not interested in. But I will say this, she's really cute, so if I had seen her, I probably would have remembered her. So if you pushed me against the wall, I would say that she wasn't there. But if there was, Chester would definitely have seen it. As he returned to his work, my blood began to boil. This bitch took my money for beer and went off to do something stupid. Probably went to buy herself some clothes or something, I hissed. Whoever spares the rod spoils his wife, Rab laughed. But since we're here, we can buy beer, brother-in-law. And look at it this way, since she clearly messed up today, it will be easier for you to tell her that Tammy is moving into your bedroom and she is moving onto the couch. You're right about that, I agreed. Victoria. I woke up tired and confused. I looked around and realized that I was lying on a very soft and comfortable bed. Besides the dry mouth and ringing in my ears, I felt better than I had in a long time. I remembered how Zeke hit me in the morning. I looked around and noticed that there were no windows in the room. I started wondering what time it was. Zeke will rip my head off, I thought. I tried to estimate how long I had been gone. I knew I had been asleep for a while. I looked around the room. The first thing I saw was a huge flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. I wished that I could stay here long enough to watch this TV. We had a tiny TV at home, and I could only watch it when Zeke allowed me to. He spent most of his time watching NASCAR, Swamp People, fishing shows, sports, and adult videos. I looked across the room and saw a closet that was filled with clothes. There were a lot of beautiful dresses, jackets, and blouses. I realized that some lucky bitch lived in this room, and probably they brought me here so that I could recover from everything that had unsettled me. I tried to remember what happened, but everything was in a fog. I put one foot on the floor and tried to stand up. Everything around was spinning. Then I saw him. I sat down on the bed again and looked at him. He looked up from some device he was holding in his hands. When his eyes focused on me, I saw his face. He was a really nice man with very kind eyes. Some handsome men are so narcissistic and arrogant that you can see it in their eyes. But not this one. His eyes radiated only kindness, mixed with some kind of sadness. He stood up and walked towards the bed. He looked at me and smiled. He seemed genuinely happy to see me. When his gaze settled on my cheek, he noticed a mark on the left side. "Who hit you?" he asked sharply. "Oh, it will go away in a couple of days," I said. "My husband, Zeke, did this morning." I guess I snapped too much, and I fell silent, noticing that the kindness emanating from his eyes had disappeared. There was such darkness in his eyes that I became scared. "He will never hit you again," he said calmly. "I wish I could believe that," I chuckled. "But if it comes down to it, it's probably time for me to go home." Kindness returned to his eyes, and he shook his head. "Victoria, you're home," he said confidently, "and no one will hit you again." "I swear." "Zeke hits me whenever he wants," I said. "But he is my husband, so he has the right to this. No one has the right to beat you, and Zeke is no longer your husband." "Victoria," he hesitated. "It's really hard to say, and I hope that one day you can understand it. I guess I hope that in time you won't just come to terms with it. But now you're mine." I burst out laughing. I decided it was some kind of joke. Zeke probably did it. Maybe this is one of those reality TV shows. I started looking for hidden cameras, but couldn't find them. "Okay," I said, "I'll play along. How long will this last?" "I hope forever," he said. I looked into his eyes and didn't see a drop of humor there. And I didn't see the deception. This crazy guy really thought I was going to stay here. I stood up and tried to run past him on my still weak legs. I reached a large metal door, but couldn't open it. Heck, it didn't even have a handle on it. "Let me out of here," I screamed. "Let me out, right now. When Zeke finds out about this, he will beat your pretty face. He's probably already looking for me." He shook his head. "First of all," he said, "Zeke isn't really looking for you. He waited about 3 hours after you left, and then went to the 7 and bought himself a beer. Yes, he asked the cashier at the store about you, but after that he just went home and started drinking. You've been missing for a whole day, and he hasn't even called the police to report your disappearance." I was shocked. I wasn't surprised that Zeke didn't report me missing. I was shocked that a whole day had passed. "If Zeke knows what's best for him, he'll never come near me," he said. "I might have to kill him for hitting you, and—" "Wait," I said. "You think it's wrong for Zeke to hit me, but you yourself are ready to kill him for it." He nodded. "You are mine now. No one can hurt you, and I will never let that happen again." Guy, this is the United States of America," I said. "We sort of abolished slavery and human ownership about 150 years ago. Now no one can own another person." "I don't know about that," he said. "Ever since you opened those beautiful blue eyes, you have owned me." My knees went weak when he said that, and it wasn't because they drugged me with something. "But you're wrong, Victoria. Slavery is illegal here, but it exists everywhere. Every day, thousands of women from Europe and Asia travel here and sell houses in almost every state. This is not. Did you bring me here for this?" I screamed. "I will not become a woman of easy virtue. I'll smash any guy you bring here to smithereens." He laughed so hard that I thought he was going to wet himself. "What's so damn funny?" I snapped. "You're just perfect," he laughed. "God, how I wish I could have met you in another way. Victoria, I didn't go through all these difficulties and expenses to get a woman of easy virtue, and certainly not to share you with other men. If you are going to have sex, it will be with only one person, me." I was stunned. I couldn't understand why he went to all this effort. He was an attractive man. Surely he could win any woman with just one smile. And apparently he had money, which meant even more opportunities. So let's talk about how this will work, he said. I have a better offer, I replied. Since you want me so much, fine, I won't argue. How about I just sleep with you and you let me go? He looked at me sadly. His face was so sad that tears almost came to my eyes. Honestly, I would have preferred that our relationship started differently, he said. Victoria, I don't love you yet. I mean, I've studied you. I know everything about you. That's why you like this room so much. It was designed based on things you said you liked. I hope that over time you will at least begin to respect me a little. But it's not about sex at all. And you won't just leave here. We will be together for a long time. I realized that he was serious. Then he did what I least expected. He must have pressed some hidden button because the huge metal door suddenly opened. I rushed towards her without even showing it. The closer I ran to the door, the more it began to itch and burn in my neck. I felt a strange tingling sensation. He stood aside and sadly shook his head. Goodbye, handsome, I thought as my feet darted across the soft carpet. I was surprised why he didn't even try to stop me. When I approached the door, something happened to my body. He came up to me, picked me up, and calmly carried me back from the door. As soon as we moved further away from the door, the pain disappeared. Sorry, Victoria, he said. And for some reason, I realized that he was truly, sincerely sorry. Can we talk now? He asked. I nodded. Are you hungry? He asked. We could eat while we talk. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. What would you like to eat? What do you have? I asked. In fact, I was hungry, and fasting would not improve my situation. Victoria, my task is to make you happy, he said, smiling. You can get whatever you want. Then let me go, I said. Well, everything except that, he replied. Can I have some pizza? I asked. He smiled and nodded. He walked up to the wall and pressed the button. He placed an order through the intercom and returned to me a few minutes later. We ordered pizza. It will be here in 20 minutes. Why don't you wear something comfortable? He suggested. These are all the clothes I have, I said. I have a few more things at home, but... I trailed off when he laughed again. Victoria, this is your room, he said. All the clothes here are chosen for you, and everything is your size. I stood up, avoiding the doorway. I looked around the closet and saw a lot of clothes, all neatly arranged by color. I opened one of the drawers and saw different sets of underwear and nightgowns. There were thong panties and granny panties. Is this what you want? I asked with contempt in my voice. So I can put on some sexy lingerie and walk around with my chest out so you can have some fun? Victoria, I just want you to be comfortable, he said. You have a bunch of pajamas, even with ears and feet. Choose what you want. He walked outside the room and left for a few minutes. I continued to look through the closet and drawers and became convinced that he was telling the truth. I actually found pajamas with ears and feet and in 3 different colors. I also found sweatshirts and sweatpants that were so soft and thick that they probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. The strangest thing about all this was that every item was exactly my size, and they all came in colors that I like. A few items were in shades that I probably wouldn't have chosen on my own, but when I looked at myself full length in the mirror, I noticed that they really brought out the color of my hair, eyes, and skin. I must admit that my kidnapper was very attentive and prudent. In the depths of my consciousness, the idea of comparing this man with my husband had already begun to form. I took off my torn t-shirt and old denim shorts. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I didn't see anything that could drive someone crazy. I looked at my dirty bra and old panties and decided that I needed to take a shower before putting on these beautiful clothes. I walked up to a small door. Well, it seemed small compared to the huge door that kept me locked. I didn't feel any tingling. I realized that I was apparently allowed to go there. I turned the knob and heard a sound behind me. Turning around, I saw that he had entered the room again. When he saw me standing there in my underwear, he immediately turned away and walked out the door again. Sorry, he shouted. I didn't think you'd be almost naked. I was at a loss. He kidnapped me. He clearly had no intention of letting me go home to my husband and family, but as soon as he saw me in my underwear, he jumped out of the room as if scalded. On the other hand, he already told me that if I have sex, it will only be with him. None of this made sense. Maybe he wanted to pamper or fatten me up a little first before using me, so he could claim that he treated me well at the trial. "Hey," I shouted. He poked his head around the corner, but noticed that I was still in my underwear and immediately put it away again. "You have several robes hanging in your bathroom," he shouted. I looked into the bathroom and saw that he was right. I wondered why there were 3 robes hanging there at once. I put one of them on. "That's it, I'm dressed," I shouted, and he entered the room again. I noticed that he carried a bottle of wine and 2 glasses in one hand, and in the other he was holding a bottle of Schatz beer. He then left the room again and returned with a cart containing soft drinks. "So what's going on here?" I asked. He just looked at me curiously. "If you're going to use me anyway, why are you reacting so strangely to me in my underwear?" He looked very offended. Then he nodded his head. "I understand what you're saying," he said, "but you got it all wrong. No one is going to take advantage of you ever. No one is going to hurt you or treat you badly ever." "But you said we would have sex," I insisted. "I said I want us to do this," he repeated, "but it will always be only at your request." I was shocked. "So you are ready to kidnap me and keep me here against my will, away from my husband and family, but you are not ready to use me. It sounds stupid, right?" he admitted. "So why didn't you want to see me in my underwear?" I asked. "Victoria, I hope that one day you can trust me, and maybe you'll even start to respect me a little," he said shyly. "I can't earn your trust by violating your personal space. This is your room. This is your part of the house. You're in charge here, and—" The intercom on the wall beeped, and a voice announced that the pizza had been delivered. He walked up to the conference room and told them to bring the pizza downstairs. A few minutes later, the woman I saw earlier came into the room, carrying a box of pizza. She was not at all surprised to see me in the room, which indicated that she had been here before. She didn't look directly at me, as if she was trying to pretend I wasn't there. I remembered this fact for the future. Perhaps she felt guilty for participating in my abduction. This could be useful for my escape. My captor, whose name was Adam, and I had a conversation that was almost pleasant. He explained to me everything about the room and the things in it. It turned out that I even had a computer that I would need to figure out. I had full internet access, but limited messaging capabilities. I even got a credit card for online shopping. He looked sad as he explained that I could order whatever I wanted, but I couldn't send emails, messages, or texts. He even explained why there were 3 robes in the room. One was pure silk, another was cotton, and the third was terry cloth. He didn't know what material I preferred. I had to admit that I didn't know this myself, because I never had a robe. I had cable access to my 72-inch TV and could watch whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted. If I wanted to eat, all I had to do was walk up to the meeting room and ask, or I could cook my own food. If I couldn't cook something in my small kitchenette, I had the option of using the large kitchen in the main house. Adam said that once I got the hang of it and proved that I could be reliable, they would give me more freedom. Freedom will be provided by levels. If I behave well, I will be allowed to use the entire house and then the entire grounds. If I prove my reliability, I will be allowed to go outside the territory, and later we will be able to travel and go on vacation. "For example, where?" I asked. "For example, wherever you want," he answered. "How will you know that I won't start screaming as soon as I find myself on the street and see the first person I meet?" I asked. "I can pretend to be nice until I go outside, and then I'll scream at the top of my lungs." "You are a very young and beautiful woman, Victoria," he said. "I know this is a very unusual way for people to get close, but I really want us to become good friends. At the same time, I assume that you want to live, and I assure you that I do not intend to spend the rest of my life in prison. I took certain precautions to prevent this from happening. Among them is your implant. I and several people on my staff have little key fobs that control your implant. Even when we travel or you go somewhere, one of us will always be with you. If you try to do something, from the first sound you make, we will know that our freedom is at risk, and we will immediately press the button. What you felt at the door was just a small warning of what you might experience. The pain will be so severe that you will not be able to tell anyone anything, and if left unchecked, it could kill you. He looked down as he said this. We have all killed people while serving our country. We may not like to kill, but if it is necessary to maintain our freedom, we will not hesitate. So, no matter how much I love you, I will press the button without thinking and start all over again. Even if you are lucky and the person who finds you is an experienced surgeon, they will need to know exactly where the implant is and how to safely remove it. The likelihood that he would have the necessary equipment to do this on the street is extremely low. It was clear from his face that he didn't like talking about it. After that, we just discussed what I could do and what I couldn't do. He said that the next day when he returned from work, he would give me a tour of the house and grounds. When I asked what I should do during the day, he simply smiled and said, "Whatever you want." And he didn't lie. The next day when I woke up, I stretched and looked around, thinking that this was the best dream of my life. I was about to finish the remaining pizza when I noticed the note he left on the table next to my bed. The note wished me a wonderful day and reminded me that if I needed anything, I could simply ask for it through the intercom. I took a long bath with real bubbles. Then I looked in my closet and drawers to pick out an outfit. There were so many things there that I didn't know what to choose. I turned on the TV and looked at what some of the presenters were wearing. I put together an outfit similar to what one of them had. I let my hair down from its usual ponytail and tried to comb it. I found different sets of cosmetics in the drawers. I've never really worn makeup. I was experimenting with some remedies when I heard laughter behind me. I turned around and saw the woman who brought the pizza. "You don't know how to apply this, do you?" she laughed. I just stared at her. "And why are you dressing up? Is this some kind of game?" she asked. "Sorry," I said coldly. "I don't have a diploma in kidnapping rules." "Listen, Victoria," she said. "We should try to make this whole thing less unpleasant. He's a really good person, and believe me, he did a great job putting this together. So let's just forget about these details and try to make this as enjoyable as possible." It seemed to me that she was hiding something from me. She showed me how to apply makeup on my eyes and everything. Over the next few weeks, I learned that she was the one who bought a lot of my clothes and furnished my room. She took a couple of steps back, examined my face, and nodded her head. "You are really beautiful," she said, "but we need to do something about the hair. Regarding clothes, I think today he will just show you the house and grounds. You're not going anywhere, so it'll probably be more comfortable to wear jeans or shorts. It will be hot today, over 90 degrees. You will have many more opportunities to dress up." And although I knew she was right, I liked the dress I chose so much that I stubbornly refused to change it. When Adam returned home, I knew about it immediately because he came straight to me. Although the large door to my room was open, he knocked before entering. "This is your home, Adam," I said. "Not this part," he replied. "Well, then come in," I said. He came up to me and his face lit up. It was a strange feeling. "What?" I asked. "You look so beautiful," he said. "I would like." "What would you like?" I asked. "I wish we could go somewhere where your dress would be appropriate." "I would be glad to show you to everyone," he said. I had a strange feeling in my stomach, and I could barely keep my legs from buckling. Again, I saw that he was not lying. He was honest. I was married to Zeke for over 5 years, and he never made me feel this way. Adam reached out and slowly led me through the large door out of my room. He showed me around the house, and I really liked it. The house was beautiful and very spacious. We walked out onto the back deck and looked around the pool. On one side, there was a small forested area, but the entire area was surrounded by a fence. That night, as on all subsequent nights, Adam and I spent a lot of time together. Honestly, he spent more time with me in the first couple of months than Zeke did in our entire marriage. We played board games and watched movies. Sometimes we'd grill steaks and just look at the stars before I went back to my room. He even taught me to swim. I never knew how to swim because I grew up in a trailer park that was far from the water. The closest I was to water was taking a bath. And during all this time, he never touched me. He didn't even hug me. And I liked it. The strangest thing was that he regularly informed me that no one reported me missing during the first month that I was here. I watched the news every day, but there was not a word about my disappearance, either in the newspapers or on TV. Finally, almost 3 months after my disappearance, I saw a short report on TV. It interviewed my brother about my disappearance. They reported that I was missing on my birthday because some distant relatives had sent me cards and asked where I was. While they were interviewing my brother Rab, who didn't seem too upset about my disappearance, the camera panned slowly through the trailer park. For a moment, I saw Zeke. He tried to stay off camera, but the camera still caught him. My husband Zeke, the man I longed to return to, was lying on the couch on the porch with his feet up and a bottle of beer in his hand. He seemed completely unaffected by my disappearance. My birthday was a huge event. Adam celebrated my birthday for a whole week. Every day he brought home another gift. At the end of the week, on my actual birthday, he took me to a very expensive restaurant. I could see he was nervous about it, but there was no need for it. My need to escape had already subsided. I felt a little depressed and a little angry at the same time. I was sad that the people who knew me and lived with me my whole life didn't seem to care that I was missing. I was angry because my damn husband had just accepted my disappearance. All this time I thought they were putting up posters of my face or printing it on milk cartons. It seemed to me that I just needed to bide my time and run away because my family was tirelessly looking for me on the streets, but all this turned out to be untrue. The guy who kidnapped me cared more about me than my damn family. In the restaurant, I saw that Adam was nervous. "Adam, honey, just relax," I said. "I give you my word that I won't do anything tonight. You can trust me." It turned out to be one of those magical nights, like in the movies. It was the most romantic night of my life. After we got home from dinner, we had a glass of wine on the terrace, and then lay on the grass and looked at the stars while he showed me the different constellations. But I didn't look at the stars. I just listened to his voice and remembered that he never said a rude word to me. He never hit me, and everything he did since I arrived here was aimed at making me happy. On a whim, I turned to him and kissed his cheek. He stopped talking and simply glowed with happiness. I went into shock for a second, realizing that I had kissed the guy who wouldn't let me return home. I half expected him to immediately grab me and rip my clothes off. But he didn't. He simply smiled back at me. I felt awkward and started talking to fill the silence. "I just wanted to thank you for all the effort you put into my birthday," I said. "It doesn't mean anything more." He nodded silently, and I felt terrible. I was confused. On the one hand, this guy was kinder to me than anyone in my life. On the other hand, I constantly had to remind myself that he took me against my will and did not allow me to return home to my family and husband. I was also absolutely sure after watching that story that they were looking for me and sooner or later they would find me. It was so strange. He just stood there awkwardly, smiling at me, as if that little kiss I gave him meant the world to him. Things got even weirder in the weeks that followed. We walked around the neighborhood, and I met several neighbors. They all looked at me as if they were trying to figure out what was special about me, and everyone seemed to like Adam. Hell, I liked Adam too, if he hadn't kidnapped me. If he hadn't kidnapped me, I'd still be in that damn trailer, fetching Zeke beer. I think at that moment I just stopped thinking and started living. There were moments when I was still thinking about escape and looked around to understand how closely I was being watched. There were also times when guilt made me hide in my room. Adam seemed to sense these moments and never got angry. He just gave me space until I started looking for him again. When December arrived, bringing snow and cold weather, I realized that Adam and I had been together for 6 months. There was no further mention of my disappearance in the news. It seemed that everyone had forgotten about me. I remembered what winter was like in the trailer park and laughed. Often I had sex with Zeke more for warmth than desire. On the other hand, Adam and I had fun in the snow like a couple of kids, and then ran indoors for cups of delicious raspberry cocoa. We sat by the fireplace, whether inside by the fireplace or outside by the fire on the deck. We played video games or watched movies together on my huge TV. Adam always let me choose the films. He just sat there with this stupid smile on his face and looked at me out of the corner of his eye when he thought I didn't notice. Over the past few weeks, as Adam and I grew closer, Tella, the woman who looked after me, became increasingly sullen. She was never rude to me, but I felt like she never approved of them taking me. At first, I thought it was because she was on my side, but later I realized that she was worried about Adam, not me. A few weeks before Christmas, while talking to her, I mentioned Adam's habit of looking at me, and she lost her temper. This was the first time I saw her lose her composure. "It's really weird how he just sits and looks at everything I want to look at," I said. "We even watched Steel Magnolias last night. My brother once told me that no man in the world could get through that movie without throwing up several times." But Adam just sat there, smiling. Most of the time, he wasn't even looking at the screen. He was just looking at me. I wonder why he's doing this. "Damn it! What an idiot he is!" she suddenly screamed. "He's doing this because he loves you. For some reason, he thinks you're really fucking special. Do you even realize how lucky you are? Damn, I'd love to take your ass back to that trailer park." "I'd like that too," I said. "I would leave in an instant. Let's leave now." She simply left the room, and I didn't see her again for the rest of the day. The next day, she apologized. Finally, I realized what was happening. Tella loved him. The problem was that I also wasn't sure if I didn't love him myself. That night, while Adam and I were watching Game of Thrones, I started looking at him out of the corner of my eye too. I constantly caught his eye on me. Finally, I waited for him to look at me again, and I stared back at him. I could see it in his puppy dog eyes. He really had feelings for me. It made me feel weird. The next moment, I kissed him again, and this time it wasn't a quick kiss on the cheek. I hadn't had sex in 6 months, so I got horny very quickly. The next moment, he pushed me away from him. I was shocked. "What's happened?" I asked. "Tori, you've had more than a couple glasses of wine and you're hot," he said. "This is a big step. Maybe you should think about it first." I was a little offended, so I spoke without thinking. "Are you sure you want to refuse?" I asked. "I may not offer any more." He just looked at me. I stood up and walked towards the large door, as if showing him the exit. He stood up and followed me to the door. "Good night, Tori," he said sadly. After he left, I threw myself on the bed and burst into tears. Later that night, thinking about everything, I felt terrible. The worst thing was that I realized how stupid I had been. Adam thought more about my feelings than I did. I was a little offended that he didn't want to just jump on me and have sex. But he was more concerned about how I would feel afterwards and how I would feel about him. I think at that moment I finally understood what true love means, and that Adam really loved me. My own husband treated me like a combination of a toy and a slave. Zeke only wanted his beer and sex, but Adam really cared about my feelings. It was too difficult to comprehend. I woke up the next morning with a hangover and feeling even worse. Tella brought me breakfast and looked at me like I was crap on a stick. Man, I couldn't believe I had ruined everything with Victoria. It took months for us to feel comfortable with each other. Last night's kisses gave me hope that we were making progress and that it was sustainable. I began to believe that no matter how we ended up together, we could be a real couple. My Mustang growled and rumbled as I shifted gears, its power easily handling the drive to work. I threw myself into my work, trying not to think about how I had ruined the previous evening. For the first time since she had been with me, Victoria asked me to leave her room. All I could do was hope that one day she would understand what really happened and my reasons. I didn't reject her. I just wanted her to be fully aware of what was happening. Maybe I should have told her about Julie. Maybe if she understood what happened between us, she would understand why I have to be so careful. My heart was barely healed, and I wasn't sure it could handle another disappointment. Victoria was a very controversial presence in my life. I surrounded myself both at work and at home with a very loyal group of ex-military personnel, most of whom served with me. Some of them, especially Thela, felt that Victoria simply wasn't worth the risk. Tella voluntarily offered to put a bullet in Victoria's head and leave her body at the 7-Eleven. I didn't know why Tella was so sure that Victoria needed to be removed, but she was always too careful. The problem was that I already loved Victoria, and there was no going back. I loved her much more than I ever loved Julie, my first wife. Until last night, everything was going almost too perfectly between us. I didn't expect perfection. Nothing worthwhile happens without a couple of bumps along the way, so I expected that we would have our ups and downs, but I didn't expect it to hurt so much. And this was something that was beyond my experience. In business, we analyzed competitors with military precision. We identified their weaknesses and attacked them. Then we bought competitors, entered into partnerships with them, or put them out of business. I have to admit we could be ruthless at times, but it was a business. If only romantic longings could be addressed in the same way. But I wasn't good at emotional attachments. If everything depended on me, I would have already married Victoria. I would tell her that from the first day I saw her in her room, I loved her instantly. But my mind reminded me every day how much Julie had hurt me. So I had to be careful. I decided from the beginning that I would never tell her how I felt until she told me first. So last night was a setback, but I could handle it. I'll give her some space for a few days and wait for her to come back to me. Every day I received reports on all the people we were tracking. Surprisingly, Victoria's husband has already taken another woman. Less than 24 hours after Victoria disappeared, he moved her into his trailer. The strange thing was that this woman was Victoria's own sister. What was even stranger was that, apparently, Zeke had already managed to make her a child. However, the whole family seemed okay with it. It was also clear that no one was really looking for Victoria. It seemed like Zeke simply asked for another sister to take her place and got it. The police questioned Zeke and got him to admit that he hit her that morning before she went out to buy beer. They assumed she had simply left him. They wanted to charge him with domestic violence or battery, but without someone to file a complaint, they couldn't do it. On the other hand, they couldn't blame her for running off with the $20 he gave her for beer because they had no proof that he gave her that money, and since she wasn't there, there was no one to bring charges. They also suggested that, judging by the condition of the trailer where she lived, she was clearly doing better wherever she was. It was therefore understandable why the police did not pursue the case with the same vigor as would normally be expected. Zick. I craned my neck, trying to get around Tammy's ass. This woman has never been more than 2 damn feet away from me. Tammy, get your fat ass out of the way between me and the TV, I said. She smiled at me and moved closer so I could watch the end of the race. Dale Jr. hasn't won a race this year, so I wanted to focus because he was in the top 5 with 5 laps to go. Tammy, with her huge fat ass and bulging belly, knelt in front of me. After a few minutes, I no longer cared who won the race. "Damn it, woman," I screamed. "You made me miss the end of the race. Now I don't even know who won." "Jimmy Johnson was the first," she said. "Kyle Busch and his brother Kurt were second and third. Kevin Harvick was fourth and Jeff Gordon was fifth. Dale Jr. passed everyone on the last lap and fell back to 11th. He stayed in the top 5 until the last lap. There was no doubt about it. This bitch was amazing. She really, really liked sex. She let me do whatever I wanted with her. If I told her to lift her shirt and let my friends look at her breasts, she did it. Of course, she had problems too. First of all, she was a large woman. She had huge breasts, but she also had a huge ass and wide hips. Another problem was that she wasn't particularly attractive, but I could tell just by her look that she loved me. The only thing Victoria had that was good was her beauty. Victoria always questioned everything. She had a saucy tongue. I remember one time when she contorted her face so much that I realized she just didn't want to do it. She looked so hurt that I just told her to get away from me. Strange, but this was the only time when she immediately did what I told her. And every time I had sex with Victoria, it was as if I had to tie her down unless she wanted something. When my salary came and she wanted a new shirt or panties or something else, she agreed to have sex. I swear, I sometimes thought she was asleep during sex and only woke up when it was over. This behavior hits a man's ego hard. I also found out that this bitch was cheating on me. After she left, running off with my damn beer money, Tammy moved some of Victoria's things to make room for her clothes. Tammy found Victoria's pills. All the years that we were married, I thought that the problem was me and that I could not make children. But Victoria took pills all this time. It was as if she was saying, "You're good enough to get me out of my parents' house, but you're not good enough to have children with you." My main fear now, and Tammy's too, was that Victoria would one day return, and Victoria was too damn arrogant to sleep on the couch. Even her name was so arrogant. She answered only to the name Victoria. If her name was Vicky or Vika or something else, she simply refused to answer. She didn't even look at you. All that was needed was Victoria. How the hell could a woman who grew up in a trailer park be so arrogant? How could two sisters be so different? Tammy already told me that as soon as we have our first child, we will have a second one. I wasn't sure if she loved children or just sex. But I wasn't looking forward to Victoria's return. I was sure that someday she would come back, just to spite me, but that was not what I wanted. Victoria. After her outburst, I realized that I couldn't talk to Thella. In fact, there was no one with whom I could discuss the events of the previous night. When I thought about it, I realized that this is another reason why I need to get out of here. I knew my family must be going crazy over me, and I doubted my own mental abilities. I was sure that I had Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome occurs when a kidnapped person begins to sympathize with their captors. Victims begin to believe that they deserve it. They also begin to believe in the ideas that their captors espouse. In my case, I really started to think that what Adam was doing wasn't that bad. The worst thing was that I started to fall in love with him. I was actually ready to cheat on my husband with a man who kidnapped me from the street and wouldn't let me return to his family. I struggled with internal conflicts, trying to decide whether to try to escape at all. But the worst part was that every time I remembered looking into his eyes when he pushed me away, I realized that it was really difficult for him. It seemed to me that he wanted sex with me just as much as I wanted it with him. But something was more important to him than sex. And this thought scared the hell out of me. I felt like Adam really loved me, not like my husband. I'm talking about the kind of love like in the movies, when a man is ready to die for me, to stay with me forever. Then there was the fact that sex with Zeke was just as my grandmother described it. It's just something a woman does for her husband. "Just close your eyes and take it until it's over," she told me. "It hurts a lot the first time, but after that it's just unpleasant." And she was right. Maybe it was a combination of my body being used to sex, and I hadn't had it since I got here, and the fact that I was a little drunk, but I wanted sex with Adam. I couldn't understand why I was ready to do something to the man who held me captive that I hated doing to my own husband, and only did if I got something in return. It took me several hours to think about this before I remembered my escape plan. My goal was to gain their trust, and then, when they let their guard down, escape. Last night would have been the perfect time to advance my plan. Like Mata Hari or Charlie's Angels, I could further my plan by letting Adam have sex with me. If he was anything like Zeke, he would just roll over and fall asleep after sex. After several such incidents, I could have simply slipped out of the house while everyone was sleeping. Of course, I would have to find a way to disable the doors connected to my implant. I also thought that the remotes they carried were similar to car door remotes. If I could get far enough away from them, they wouldn't be able to harm me. So I spent the rest of the day getting myself ready for Adam. I knew almost to the second when he would come home, and sure enough, within 5 minutes of the time I expected him, I heard the growl of his Mustang engine. I sat on the sofa in my room, waiting for him. I really had to admit that the way his face lit up every time he saw me did wonders for my ego. I sat posing for a while, waiting for him to come in, but he never came. After a while, I turned on the TV and watched an episode of The Big Bang Theory on demand. He still hasn't shown up. I remembered that there were times when Adam brought people or work home and had to deal with it before coming to me. But usually he would call me on the intercom and tell me what was going on. I walked up to the intercom myself. I talked to Tella. She told me Adam was definitely home, but didn't say anything else. She asked if I wanted dinner, and I said I did. The cook prepared one of my favorite dishes, and when Tella brought it to me, I asked her if Adam would join me for dinner. We always had dinner together. She shocked me by saying that he had already had dinner. I really couldn't understand what was going on. By that time, I was allowed to move freely around the house, and even the grounds within reason. If I got too close to the gate, I felt a warning vibration. There were days when I felt like a dog living in a yard with one of those invisible fences. I went to Adam's room and noticed the TV was on. He was lying on his bed and watching one of our TV series without me. I carefully looked around the corner and looked at him. He was clearly sad for some reason. He wasn't as enthusiastic as usual. It made me feel sad too. I returned to my room and asked Tella to come to me. "What?" she said when she entered. "Why is Adam sad?" I asked. She rolled her eyes and shook her head. "Bodies, I don't need your fucking attitude," I said loudly. She just turned and looked at me. "I already know you have feelings for him," I continued. "And the best way for you to deal with this fucking unpleasant situation is for you to just do your damn job and take care of me. So why is he sad?" "Because he really loves one very stupid woman who doesn't deserve him," she said with venom in her voice. "And this stupid woman kicked him out of her room yesterday," she continued. "And so he walks all day like he's dead, as if his dog died." "I'm really sorry," I said. "I didn't know. No one has ever been upset with me, ever. I couldn't find the words. "Victoria, you failed to see him in the best light," she said. "He is truly the kindest and sweetest person I have ever met. But he is very confused inside. I shouldn't tell you this." She sat down next to me on the edge of the bed. She took out her remote control and pressed a button. The large door closed, leaving us alone. "You know a lot of us served in the military together, right?" she asked. I nodded. "Adam was our commander. We all depended on each other and never left anyone behind, no matter the situation. We all came from different places and situations, but once we came together, we became a team no matter what. In any case, each of us had our own reasons why we had to survive and get out of this hell alive. For Adam, it was Julie. She had been his lover since youth. They had just gotten married a few days before he was due to leave for duty. He had to leave home during his honeymoon. He and Julie waited until marriage to have sex, which is really stupid nowadays, but they did it." I nodded. "I didn't have sex before I married Zeke either," I said. "All my sisters slept with anyone, but I didn't see the point in it. After 5 years of being married to Zeke and having sex with him, I still don't see the point in it." "So," she continued, "we were gone for 18 months, and when we came back, we all went back to our lives. Julie lived in the house where Adam grew up. His father died while Adam was away. He was allowed to return home for the funeral, but that was the only time Adam was home during the 18 months of deployment." "He must have been very happy to see her," I said. "Not really," Tella said. "She was 5 months pregnant. Adam was broken. It destroyed his trust in everything. He had to go through hell to get rid of her in his life. At first, she tried to convince him that she became pregnant from him. He hired private detectives who found out the truth. Julie went with her friends to a bar, got very drunk, and slept with some guy. She didn't even know who it was. One of her friends admitted this. She even claimed that Julie cried over Adam's betrayal for weeks and complained about how bad the sex was. But after a few months, Julie decided that any sex was better than no sex, and began going to bars. She was stupid enough to think Adam would never find out. After that, Some of her friends refused to go with her because she had become such a woman of easy virtue that it was embarrassing to be seen with her. And many people in the city turned their backs on her because Adam fought for our country while his wife slept around. The worst part was that Adam didn't have to go. He was the only child of his parents. He could get some kind of assignment back home. His father owned a business and had enough connections to get Adam a job, at least in the non-combat part. But Adam didn't want any special conditions. Adam loved her very much, so when she tried to convince him that the child was his, he tried to believe it. He even started going with her to doctor's appointments. But one day they ran into one of Julie's lovers. That guy didn't think they were together. In his defense, Julie never told most of those guys that she was married. So he just walked up to her and told her that he would call on her in the evening, and she should be ready. Adam immediately hit him and started questioning him. He told the whole story. Julie then started making excuses, saying she was lonely, and Adam hired detectives to get the whole truth. When he confronted her and found out from the doctor that he could not be the father of her child, he filed for divorce. Julie did everything she could to hurt his feelings. She also tried to block the divorce. Adam felt betrayed and angry. He hired the best lawyers he could afford, and there was too much evidence and too many people in town who saw Julie and hated her for what she did. The strangest thing was that even some of the guys she slept with helped him. Most of them were just regular guys. If a beautiful woman offered them sex, they didn't ask any questions. Most of them felt guilty when they learned that she was the wife of a soldier who was serving overseas and testified in court. The final blow to Julie came when her doctor said that Adam could not be the father of her child, although she tried to make him believe it. This in itself was a fraud, and the judge, who was sympathetic to the soldiers, granted them a divorce. In exchange for Julie not being charged with fraud, she agreed to just walk away and leave Adam alone. He didn't have to pay her child support or support her. Most of us thought we had won. But Adam fell into a deep depression. He didn't date women. He didn't trust anyone, especially women. Do you know that until recently, even most of the secretaries and clerical workers at Adam's company were men? He just didn't hire women, that's all. Not only did Julie break his heart, she broke his spirit. "Why did he hire you?" I asked. "That's part of my problem," she admitted. "Adam sees me as a soldier, a member of his team. I'm like family to him. Despite the fact that I love him and would never betray him, he simply does not perceive me as a woman. It's just unfair." In any case, we decided that turning to prostitutes might be the best solution. We tried to explain this to him. No emotional attachments. He simply pays for the service and leaves when it is finished. If he likes the girl, he can ask her again. If not, he will simply choose another one. We went to one of the best houses in Reno, but it just didn't work. Adam is not the kind of guy who can just use a woman without emotional attachment. For him, sex is not just a mechanical process. Damn it, neither of you have had sex in months, and since the day you showed up here, he's been as happy as he's ever been. You said to yourself that you asked me why he glows so much every time he sees you. He just feels good being around you. That is why I am glad that you and he are going through a difficult period now. He's getting too attached to you. Sooner or later, we will still make a mistake, and you will run away. We have plans in place if this happens. We all know that we will have to disappear with new identities, because as soon as you get out, you will go to the police and they will try to arrest us. But believe me, they won't find us. Like I said, it's crazy risky, but most of us love Adam. We will do anything for him. If you make him happy, then so be it. I just hate to see him unhappy because you play with his feelings. He deserves better. And yes, Victoria, I know we did a terrible thing to you. But none of us, especially him, have ever harmed you. Everything he did was aimed at making you happy. I see this as the beginning of the end. He really has feelings for you, very strong ones. I think if you're both unhappy for a while, he'll offer you a deal." "What deal?" I asked. "Adam is a very fair person," she replied. "I think once he gets stronger emotionally, and I don't know how long that will take, He'll probably let you go and give you money so you don't have to seek his punishment." "How long will it take?" I asked. "I don't know," she replied, "but it's all really up to you. I'm sure you're feeling good right now, and you don't want him in your room looking at you, right?" When she left, leaving the door open, I turned off the light in my room and the TV. It was already well after 10 in the evening, and I was thinking about everything we had discussed. And then I realized, for the first time, something I never expected. I wasn't happy either. I got dressed and waited for him to come to me, but he did exactly what I told him. I let him know that he wasn't wanted in my room, and he didn't come back. The funny thing was that when he didn't come back, I went looking for him. His sadness bothered me, and it wasn't Stockholm Syndrome. I had to admit to myself that I missed him. I covered myself with a blanket and fell asleep. I didn't fall asleep right away either. The next morning, I got up as usual and went to his room. He was already at work, as usual. I got dressed again and put on what he liked to see on me. Adam didn't like it when I looked like a woman of easy virtue, but he liked my legs and tummy. So I put on a blouse and tied it under the bust and a pair of short, but not too short shorts. I went out onto the terrace, sat on the edge of the pool, and started splashing my feet in the water. He came into the kitchen one time and saw me. I looked at the kitchen out of the corner of my eye and saw him when he entered. I turned and our eyes met. He was even sadder. It seemed that separation from me was causing him pain. My heart broke even more. I found myself wanting him to do like Zeke, come up to me, slap me, and tell me to get a grip. In my marriage, even when Zeke was wrong, he was right. He was a man and his word was law. In this case, I was wrong. Adam tried to protect me from my own stupidity. He refused to take advantage of me when I was drunk, and he suffered because of it. The funny thing was that I suffered too. I missed his company, his laughter, and the way he treated me. And if it was Stockholm Syndrome, then don't give a damn about it. He left the kitchen, and I knew that I could not survive another night like this. I walked back to my room through the darkened house. I took off all my clothes and got into my bath. I took the most fragrant bath oil I had and enjoyed the hot water for a long time. When I got out of the bath, I put on a silk robe and left my room. I climbed the stairs and went to Adam's room. I didn't knock on the door, I just turned the knob and entered. He lay on his bed and watched TV. "Victoria, you should knock before entering someone else's room," he said. I could see that he was surprised to see me. I think he just said it out of panic because he couldn't think of anything else to say. I turned off his TV and climbed onto his bed. "Victoria," he began. "Shut up," I said sharply. "You were right, Adam," I said, kissing him. "Vic," he began. "I'm not drunk this time," I said quietly. I felt like a prostitute because I knew we were going to have sex, and it was cheating on my husband. I always suspected that Zeke was cheating on me, but that's what all men do, or at least that's what I thought. But I never cheated on him. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that sex was never that important to me. But at that moment, for the first time in my life, I wanted to have sex with me. "Tori," he asked. "I'm ready," I said, and I really was. "This will be an important step. There will be no turning back," he said. "Who wants to retreat?" I asked. "I want you, Adam." We had sex, and then I ruined it by saying I thought it was a joke. I looked into his eyes, and I really wanted to tell him how I felt. But the guilt of what I had just done and my stupid way of joking ruined this beautiful moment. "I thought you said you'd never take advantage of me," I said flippantly. The expression on his face showed pure horror. His eyes, which I loved so much, widened in surprise. He sighed sharply, grabbed his stomach, and ran to the bathroom, where he began to vomit loudly. I was as shocked as he was. While he was taking my words seriously, I remembered something very important that I had somehow forgotten. Only in the afternoon did Tella explain to me how fragile he is emotionally. The poor guy had already been destroyed by one woman in the worst possible way, and now he reaches out to me. Of course, he had a very strange way of doing it, but at that moment I didn't care at all. After what we had just experienced, I didn't pay attention to the details. It seemed to me that we touched each other's souls. He made me feel more loved and alive in those few minutes than I had in my entire life before. He simply had to understand this. He had to know I was joking. Didn't he? I mean, I was the one who came into his room looking for him. I walked in, closed the door, and took off everything. Well, my robe. I even made it clear that I was not drunk. I begged him. He even asked me if I was sure. He should have known I was just joking. "Adam," I screamed. He didn't answer, and then I heard it. This eerie sound was as if Satan's claws were scraping the gates of hell. I instantly realized that Adam had somehow gotten into his car and driven away. I had no idea how he got out of the bathroom, let alone the house. I was almost hysterical. I jumped out of bed and ran down the stairs, naked as a newborn. Damon and Tella were in the main hall, trying to figure out what the hell was going on. Adam clearly didn't have time to tell them anything. I tried to break through between them to the front door. Damon tried to stop me, but I was determined and dodged him straight to Tella, who didn't even try to stop me. I heard Damon yell "no" just as I reached the door. I was allowed to move freely around the territory, but going beyond the threshold of the house was prohibited. I lost consciousness almost immediately. Through the fog, I heard Damon speak angrily to Tella. "You could have at least tried to stop her. Our job is to protect her, you know," he said sharply. "To hell with it," she snapped. "If that little crap hurt him or got him into that state again, they'll never find the body. Lock her back in her cage while I try to reach Adam, and until he comes back and says otherwise, she is completely locked in her room. No more running around the house naked." I woke up in my room later. It must have been after midnight. Tella was sitting in a chair next to my bed and watching TV. "I have a headache," I said, looking at her. "Where is Adam?" "What did you think would happen?" she asked sarcastically. "You could have at least tried to warn me," I blurted out. I was confused. I had to try to catch up with him. "His car produces over 500 horsepower, she chuckled. "What were you hoping for? Were you going to flash your magic breasts at him and make the car slow down?" I just looked at her with contempt. "Where is he?" "I have no idea," she replied. "I don't even know why he left, but I have a feeling you know, so spill it." "This is personal," I said. She looked at me, tilting her head. I didn't know why she did this, but I had a feeling it didn't bode well. "I can't kill Damon. He's part of the family," she said sharply. I realized that the fact that Damon was still in the house saved my life. "Listen, we both want him to be okay," she said in a flat tone. "Actually, if you think about it, we both want the same thing. We both want you to get out of here. So let's try to work together and maybe you can come home." I didn't have the heart to tell her that I wasn't sure I even wanted to leave anymore. Well, we did it," I muttered. "You had sex," she finished. "God, just say it. It wasn't a secret. The whole neighborhood probably knows that this happened." She looked at me with jealousy written all over her face. Even her sarcasm and angry tone couldn't hide it. "Anyway," I continued, "we didn't just have sex. It was something special. It was wonderful. I've never felt anything like this or done anything like this before." "You're married, aren't you?" she asked. "Your husband." She fell silent abruptly. I thought she meant to say, "Your husband had sex with you." "But it was never like this," I said. "I swear it was the best time of my life. I'm not just talking about sex. It was the best experience I've ever had." And then he said this. He told me he loved me. Her eyes narrowed and her entire face hardened. Bodies, it was the strangest moment. I didn't know what to say, so I joked, and she just looked at me like I was stupid. "He opened his heart to you, and you joke about it?" she asked, as if she couldn't believe it. This only made me feel more guilty. "That must have been an incredible joke," she said, shaking her head. "Come on, tell me." I told her what I said, and she almost fell out of her chair. "You idiot," she hissed. "This is not a joke. This is one of the most terrible things that can happen to a woman. It is also one of the most heinous charges that can be brought against a man. And then, don't forget that Adam feels a great sense of guilt about you." Why should he feel guilty? I asked. Have you forgotten that we kidnapped you? She asked. He already talked about letting you go. Of course, we will have to leave here and never return. No, I screamed. He can't. She looked at me sharply. You don't want to leave, do you? She asked. What about Zeke and... His name is Zeke, I said, and he is my husband. He loves me. He married me, and I'm counting down the days until we get back together. Who are you trying to convince? She asked. Me or yourself? I think you feel guilty because you let Adam have sex with you, and you enjoyed it too much, so you pushed him away. You made that joke because you felt guilty. Good wives don't sleep with other men. You felt like a woman of easy virtue and wanted someone else to take the blame. I stared at the floor. And as for your loving husband, just remember that I saw the trail you had when Damon and I captured you. Adam would rather die than ever hit you. It's a shame that Zachariah, or whatever his name is, doesn't think the same way. Yes, we always get what we deserve. So keep counting these days, and very soon you will be with him again. Zick. $1,000, I repeated. The woman in front of me nodded her head and looked at something on her notepad. Actually, it's $500 for you and $500 for Tammy, but if you combine finances, I think it'll be $1,000. And all we have to do is pretend, or rather, share our feelings about our loss, I clarified. Yes, sir, she confirmed. Can we do this now? I asked. She motioned for the operator, who began setting up the camera. I approached Tammy. Honey, I need you to do something for me, I told her. I need you to talk to this camera and tell me how much you miss your sister. I don't miss her at all, Tammy snapped. Is that what you want me to say? No, you stupid chicken. I want you to cry and tell her how much you miss her. Imagine we're making a movie, I said. Just watch me do it. When the camera was pointed at me, I just started talking. The woman asked me if I missed Victoria. Every day, I said sadly. Victoria was the light of my world. Without her, my world is darkness and loneliness. I just remember the last thing I said to her before she left to get a beer. I told her I loved her and... I burst into tears, then looked back at the camera. Victoria, dear, if you are out there, please come home. Then I started crying again. I thought that these city people would appreciate my tears. They always liked it when men were sensitive. Let's see how you top this, I whispered to Tammy. Damn, Tammy was a natural actress. She was supposed to be Elizabeth Taylor, or rather, the Elizabeth Trailer of our family. I just want my sister to come home, she said directly to the camera. A lot has changed since she left 9 months ago. She motioned for the camera to follow her and walked up onto the porch. She picked up the baby and held him up in front of the camera. Victoria, this is your niece. She was born while you were away. We named her Victoria after you. I felt angry because Tammy used my trick and started crying, and the baby started crying too. So I ran back to the camera and started crying with them. As soon as the woman said, "Cut," we both immediately stopped crying, and Tammy carried the baby back to the crib. I extended my hand, and the woman handed me 10 fresh $100 bills. I walked up to Tammy as they packed up their equipment and left. You lying bitch, I laughed. You know we named the baby Tummy after you. Yes, but we spell her name with an I, she said. I counted out 100 and handed it to her. They gave us $200 for acting, I said. You're entitled to half. Her eyes lit up and she grabbed the money, hiding it down the neckline of her blouse. You better find another place to hide them, I said. That's the first place I'd check. 2 hours later, she came to the trailer and tearfully told me that I was right, and she had lost her money. Don't worry, Tammy, I said. Easy money, easy care, but I will share mine with you. I handed her another 100 and told her to spend 50, but bring me the change. Victoria, sleep works wonders when you finally get it. I had a series of dreams that helped me organize my thoughts. I dreamed about what happened in Adam's room last night. It wasn't just that we had sex. It was all the way he went to show me how much he cared about me. Even the way his people kidnapped me spoke volumes. They didn't leave a single mark on me. I woke up feeling a little dizzy, but otherwise unharmed. They apparently implanted that tiny radio chip in me while I was unconscious, but I guess that's better than being tied up, chained, or beaten. When I thought about Adam, all I felt was love. He never hit me or raised his voice at me. I also dreamed about Zeke and what my life could have been like if I had stayed home. I couldn't understand why, at 23, I felt guilty for leaving a 40-year-old man who had married a girl and treated her like a slave. Tello was right. Zeke forced me to have sex every time he wanted. It didn't matter whether I wanted it or not. If I said anything he didn't like, I'd get hit, and we almost never left the trailer. I married Zeke to get away from my parents, and that's all I got. I moved just 3 trailers down, but I found myself in virtual slavery. Why the hell would I ever want to go back to this? My last dream was strange. I dreamed that the police broke into the house and saved me. They brought me back to Zeke. I saw how the years passed. I was getting bigger, like all the women in the trailer park. We had 6 kids, and we were still living in that trailer. In my entire life, I have never left this territory more than a mile. Zeke and I fought constantly. It was a nightmare. Adam was arrested during the raid and sent to federal prison for my kidnapping. I tried to explain that I was treated well and I didn't want to press charges, but Zeke convinced everyone that I had been zombified, and therefore he, as my husband, had the right to make decisions for me. He wanted Adam to be executed in the electric chair, but in his dream he called him an electric chair. We even named one of our children Lecter. When I woke up the next morning, I already knew exactly what I needed to do. I took a shower, got dressed, and calmly walked over to the intercom. I called Tella and asked for Damon. She was unhappy, but handed the phone to him. I asked him to come to me immediately. When he arrived, Tella was with him. "You look beautiful this morning, Victoria," he said. "How can I help?" "The question is, what can you do to help yourself?" I said. They both looked at me strangely. "In 10 minutes, I will leave this house and go look for Adam. You both know how much guilt caused me to ruin one of the most beautiful moments of my life last night. Today, I'm going to fix everything. I will leave this house and find Adam. I probably won't be able to leave this room because my implant will cause me a lot of pain. If I survive this, the exit door will hurt me again like it did last night, and I'm sure there are other obstacles. I don't have a car and I don't know where he is, but I'll keep looking until I find him. Even if I have to ask every person on every street who I run into until I find him." Damon swallowed loudly and Tella chuckled. "Tella, I know you don't care what happens to me, but your job is to protect me, so if I die, that means you won't have a job anymore." "Victoria, wait," Damon said. "Let me call him." "I already told you you have 10 minutes, I said. Damon took out his cell phone and started talking. He wasn't talking to Adam, so he had to wait to be switched over. "Why the hell don't you have a phone, Adam?" he finally said. He then looked at me to let me know that Adam was on the line. I heard him telling Adam what I was threatening to do. After a few moments, he looked at me. "He said he would come home tonight, and you two could talk then. He also said he was sorry and he was trying to sell the company as quickly as possible. He already has several potential buyers, and perhaps you will be home tomorrow evening. If he can arrange everything, it will happen even sooner." "So he's at work?" I asked. Damon nodded. "Okay, take me to him," I said. "But he said—" Damon began. "Damon, things are different now," I said. "Now I'm in charge. I guess I was always in charge. I just didn't know it. I'm not going to try to escape. You can even handcuff me if you want, but you will take me to Adam." "But he's at work," Damon said. "Okay, I'll go," I said. I stood up and headed towards the door. Tella jumped up and blocked my way. "You'll get hurt," she said sharply. "And it will be your fault," I said. "Does Adam know that last night I almost got fried trying to catch up with him? Or that you didn't even try to stop me?" She quickly turned pale and then took out the remote as I walked towards the door. When I got upstairs, she pressed another button and I stepped onto the porch for the first time. "You know I can still just kill you, right?" she asked. I nodded. "Take me to Adam," I said. I already said I'm not going anywhere. We drove into town, passing through streets I had never seen before. What surprised me was that I had lived in this city all my life, but had never seen its center. Our city had a central district with suburbs radiating from it. We lived in one of the wealthier suburbs. The trailer park where I grew up was in one of the poor suburbs. Surprisingly, I was only 20 minutes away from Zeke's trailer the entire time. We arrived at a beautiful glass and metal building with secure parking. The security guard stopped checking the pass of the car that was leaving and waved us through. I waved to him, even though I didn't know him. We got out of the car and went through the back entrance where there was another guard. He immediately tensed when he saw Damon and Tella. I half expected him to salute them. I waved to him too, and he smiled at me. We walked around the production floor, where hundreds of people were working at various machines. Tella made sure that I did not go beyond the lines marked on the floor. Behind these lines, you need to wear safety glasses, she explained. We took the elevator to the third floor. There were only offices and conference rooms. We entered one of the rooms where a slightly elderly but very serious woman looked up at us from her desk. "He's busy, Tella," she said. I just smiled at her and walked past her before she could get up. I turned the doorknob and the door opened. The woman tried to grab me, but I was already inside. With amazing strength, she pulled me out of the room, but it was too late. "Adam," I screamed. Almost immediately, he raised his head and told the woman to let me go. Compared to this woman, Tella was nothing. This woman, despite her sharp suit and professional manner, was clearly another ex-military woman. But this one was more of a guard dog. She looked at me as if she wanted to rip my head off and shit in the hole that had formed. It took her some time to come to her senses. She stood and glared at me, smoothing out her business suit. I smiled at her and approached her again, holding out my hand. "No offense," I said. "You're just doing your job, I understand that. And I hope you understand that I'm desperate. If you were me, I have no doubt you would do the same. By the way, my name is Victoria." She shook my hand, but I could tell from the look on her face that she knew who I was. I closed the door behind me and slowly walked across the room. Adam sat at a massive table that looked as if it was as big as a bed. "Victoria, he began. "What are you apologizing for, Adam?" I asked. I started walking around the table because I just needed to touch him. He started to back away from me. I giggled. Everything in this office was designed to show one thing, to show power. Everything said that the man at this table controls everything around him. And now this man was retreating from the trailer park girl. I let him retreat, and I followed him like a lioness. When he approached the wall, I simply drove him into a corner from where he could no longer escape. He began. "You love me, Adam," I said. "No, I don't," he answered quietly. "I kidnapped you." "You better admit it. It's written all over your face," I said. "Adam, forgive me. I should never have said what I said, but I've never felt like I did last night in my life. I was scared. I also struggled with guilt over how I felt about you. You have to understand how I was raised. Hell, on the rare times I went to that little church in our trailer park, I saw a picture of Tammy Wynette next to Jesus. I was raised to always remain faithful to my husband, and I think last night I was trying to stay faithful to the wrong person. Can I try again?" "What?" he asked again. "I want you to say again what you said last night and give me the opportunity to answer the way I wanted," I told him. He looked at me curiously. "Victoria," he began. I put my hand to his mouth. "Wait, we have to do this right," I said. "Sit down at your giant table and let me come in again, like the first time." He looked at me as if I had gone crazy. I quickly ran to the door and opened it. Then I walked out into the reception area, where Damon, Tella, and the other woman were standing and looking at the door. I counted to 3 while they all looked at me in surprise and went back into the office. Adam sat at his desk and smiled at me. I walked around the table and sat on his lap. "Victoria, I love you," he said. Something in me has changed. It was strange. Maybe that's how some of those women in the park, including my sister, felt. This man turned me into some kind of woman of easy virtue. I love you too, Adam, I said. I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him. I heard behind us, but I didn't care. Hey, Tella shouted sharply. Do you realize that the door is open and people can see what you're doing? Adam, Nate Johnson is on the line. Tell him we're not selling yet, he said. She rolled her eyes and left the office. We'll continue this when you get home, I smiled. This is to remind you what awaits you at home. Don't be late, I smiled and kissed him again. Come on, Damon, I said. Let's go home. I'm starving. That evening, Adam returned home earlier than usual. I spent most of the day in the kitchen. I cooked all the best dishes I knew for him. For some reason, I wanted to cook dinner myself, even though we had a cook. He ate everything I put in front of him, including my blueberry pie, and then we ran upstairs to his room. We were in bed by 6 in the evening and did not leave there until the morning. I was even a little ashamed because, despite how good the sex was, the best thing happened after. I woke up around 1 in the morning. I felt better than I ever had in my life. I realized that I was not in my bed, but in Adam's bed, and he was lying next to me, hugging me with both arms, as if protecting me. I felt warm, safe, and never wanted to be anywhere else. I snuggled closer to him and fell asleep again. When I woke up the next morning, I remembered how he carefully removed himself from my embrace, kissed me goodbye, and left. I took a shower and called Damon and a few guys to help. What do you want us to do? They asked. I need to move all my things into this closet, and I'll show you what else needs to be moved, I said. It won't work, Tella quipped. Call him, I said. I'm sure he'll let me do it. Victoria, that's not what I meant, she said. You have a lot more clothes than Adam. Your closet was built like a large apartment inside and under the house. Your closet is bigger than the trailer you used to live in. Adam has a standard closet. Even if you take out all his things, yours still won't fit. Have you ever tried to count how many pairs of shoes you have? So what should we do? I asked. We'll have to go to Home Depot and add another clothes rail on the opposite side of Adam's closet. You'll just leave here your 20 or 30 favorite outfits and maybe 10 or 12 pairs of shoes. You can leave the rest where it is or put it in one of the other closets on this floor. What about my TV? I asked. Adam has a nice flat screen right here, she said. Yes, but mine is much larger, I said. So what? She said. Besides, judging by what happened last night, I doubt you'll be watching much TV anytime soon. I was 23 years old and in love, and this time it was for real. This time I was with a person not to escape from my parents. These were the best 2 years of my life. Adam and I have always been together. We were traveling. We went outside. We stayed at home. After 2 years of marriage, it felt like we were just beginning to discover who we could become. The following winter, Adam fell ill. Nothing serious, it was just the flu, but he was weak, irritable, and unhappy. When I was sick, he stayed at home and took care of me himself. He never left my bed for a minute. I wanted to do the same for him. But it was when he started to recover that everything went wrong. I had just gotten out of the shower, and he tried to get up. Adam, go back to bed, I told him. I need to get the iPad, he said. I'll bring it, I said. Where is he? In the office on my desk, he said. For more than 6 months, all security systems were disabled. I could go anywhere freely. I even had a car. I had a new Cadillac XLR hardtop. I kissed Adam's forehead and adjusted the blanket on him. I was wondering why he needed an iPad, because he was going to go back to sleep anyway. But I loved it, so I went and took it. I looked around the office for the iPad. I played with him a lot during our holidays, so I knew what he looked like. I just didn't know where exactly it was in the office. Its cover made it look like a regular notepad. I didn't spend much time in this office, so I looked around. I noticed that, just like at work, Adam never turned off the computer. When I was about to leave, a new letter arrived. Hearing a beep, I went over to see who it was from. The letter was from Tell. It began with her announcing that she would return ahead of schedule. She was supposed to be on vacation, but her family was getting on her nerves. I smiled. Tella and I were getting along pretty well by this time. But Tella was so aggressive and pedantic that, probably, vacationing with her elderly parents drove her to white heat. It was my curiosity that ruined everything. On Adam's desktop, I saw a folder labeled V Family. I opened it. In this house, I was the only one starting with the letter V. It turned out that it was a series of emails and reports about what my family was doing. I felt strange. Why would Adam spy on my family? I clicked on a file called TV Show and a video appeared on the screen. It was a show about missing people and how their families tirelessly try to find them. The program had a story about me. It was told how my family was tirelessly looking for me. I felt terrible, and at the same time I was angry with Adam for hiding this from me. I was shocked when I saw the interview with Zeke. He talked about how much he missed me and how much he loved me. He even cried during the interview. My heart was pounding in my chest. Then I saw an interview with my sister and everything went wrong. My sister also spoke about her love for me. It was shocking because Tammy and I had never been close. She always called me all sorts of hurtful names and teased me because even though I was older, she was always bigger than me. And on the screen she was the size of a whole house. But at the same time she was crying for me, and it made me angry. After all, she was my own sister. The highlight of the story was her showing her daughter to the camera and telling her how she named her after me. She named the child after me. All this led me to believe that I was probably dead, lying in a ditch somewhere, and my body simply had not been found. Then I realized that I had to return home. I kissed Adam goodbye and left him a note. I wrote that I had to return to my family and that he could trust me. I won't tell anyone about him. I didn't pack my things because if I just showed up with my suitcases, it would look suspicious. I also didn't go in my car, but took a taxi. From the moment I left the house, I started crying. I realized that I was probably making a mistake. I think it was because I loved Adam more than life itself, but I needed to see my family and at least let them know that I was okay. I thought I would stay home for 2 or 3 days and then disappear again and go back to Adam. At least they will know that I love them all and that I am alive and well. As for Adam, he knew that I loved him and he loved me, so he would forgive me when I returned. But we still need to discuss why he hid information about my family from me. I got out of the taxi in front of the police station, which was only half a mile from the trailer park. I walked up to the counter at the entrance to the small precinct and noticed that Bud Jenkins, who had been a patrolman 2 years ago when I disappeared, was now a desk sergeant. "Hi, Bud," I said. "I ran away." He looked up at me and smiled. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "How can I help you?" "Bud, it's me," I said. He smiled again. It became clear that he did not recognize me. "What are you thinking about now?" I asked. Honestly. "Well, to be honest, and without offending you, ma'am, I think that's what you want from me. Whenever one of you rich society ladies comes here with a problem, I have to send 3 or 4 of my guys out to find some damn dog who jumped out of your Mercedes to chase a squirrel. And I'll chase your damn dog too, because if I don't, I'll have my budget cut when you complain to your husband and he talks to his friend, senator, or councilman. So you have pictures of your damn dog." "Bud, what makes you think I'm a society woman?" I laughed. "Well, you are as beautiful as a new sunrise," he said. "Your shoes cost more than I earn in a month. This bracelet could probably buy the trailer I live in. This beautiful hairstyle was clearly done by some fancy hairdresser. Any fool can understand that you are one of the rich, and wealth is not something that is in abundance here." "Bud, it's me," I said. "Victoria Bailey. Well, Victoria Lake, since I'm married to Ezekiel Lake." He looked at me again. "Vicky," he said then. "My name is Victoria," I said sharply. "Just checking," he said, surprise evident on his face. "You never let anyone call you anything other than your full name." Hearing this made me think about how much I love it when Adam calls me Tori. It, in a way, made me feel like I belonged to him, and he belonged to me. A tear rolled down my cheek as I thought about how I ran away from him when he was sick. Bud started asking me a bunch of questions. He called his senior officers, and they called the district attorney. They called my family, but couldn't get through. The phone is probably off, Bud said. The prosecutor scheduled a press conference. He grumbled and complained about how untrustworthy bullies and trailer trash were. Bud agreed to drive me home and pick me up at the appointed time so that I could make it to the press conference that the district attorney had scheduled. Bud and I got into an old Jeep Cherokee. I didn't want to sit down because I was afraid that the wet spot on the seat would stain my skirt. Bud laid a few towels on the seat, and we were off. When we got to the trailer park, I shook my head. He was even more neglected than I remembered. Several trailers were new that I didn't remember, and some of the trailers were well-maintained and looked like decent homes. Apparently, their owners took very good care of them, but most looked like cheap motorhomes and were just terrible. I remembered Tella once saying that my closet was bigger than one of those trailers, and she wasn't lying. Bud and I walked out in front of Zeke's trailer. It looked like the trailer was slowly sinking into the ground, but unevenly. Even a little over 2 years after I left, the same damn brick was still being used as a step because Zeke was too cheap to buy or build a proper porch. In front of the trailer stood a battered crib containing a baby who was less than a year old. The baby was crying. Another child, believed to be about 2 years old, was wandering around the area in front of the trailer unattended. She sat down on the ground, picked a dandelion, and tried to put it in her mouth. I grabbed her and took away the dandelion. "Victoria," I said, "you can't eat dirty weeds. You'll feel bad." Bud looked at me like I was crazy. At the same time, I wondered why my niece was hanging around in front of Zeke's trailer. I opened the trailer door. My husband, Zeke, who missed and loved me, apparently decided to take some time off from his relentless search for me. And at this time, he had sex with my sister. Zeke," Bud said several times before he was heard. Zeke turned to us and simply pulled on his dirty pants. Zeke came up to us and smiled at me, then spoke to Bud. "Hi, Bud," he said. "I didn't do it." "But Zeke," Bud began. "This." "Well, heck, I didn't know it was illegal," Bud said. "I saw everyone else do it and—" "Zeke, you stupid redneck, don't you know who this woman is?" Bud asked. "Some nice, rich city woman who wants to hire me, right?" Zeke asked. "She's really cute." "She's not that pretty," Tammy said, walking over and hugging Zeke's arm, as if claiming him. I recognized this gesture because I've done it myself at several parties Adam, and I have been to over the past couple of years. The easiest way to let another woman know that a man is busy is to hug him or wrap your arms around him in front of others. "Tammy, why was Victoria walking in front of the trailer and eating weed?" I asked. "Victoria," Tammy said. "My baby's name is not Victoria. Her name is Tammy, with an I at the end. The only Victoria who was here was my worthless sister, who ran away from Zeke and stole his beer money. But she's dead." "But you said her name was Victoria on that TV show," I said, stammering. "Not a single piece of that shit was real." Tammy laughed. "We were just playing. They gave us $200 for what we said. To be honest, no one ever looked for Victoria. She was my sister, but she was an arrogant bitch who thought too much of herself. Nobody was looking for her, and we weren't looking for her. Honestly, her disappearance was a gift from God. This has made our life much easier. I was already pregnant with Zeke's baby when she disappeared. It would be hard for us to explain this shit. But just when it was needed, this bitch disappeared, as if by magic. It was like being struck by lightning. Good riddance." Tammy looked at Bud, who was shaking his head and waving his hand, trying to silence her. "Tammy, this is your sister Victoria," Bud finally said. "We found her." Zeke and Tammy's jaws dropped as they looked at me. Although their shock was simultaneous, their reactions were completely different. "Oh, damn," Tammy exclaimed. "Welcome home, baby," Zeke said, holding out his arms as if he expected me to hug him. "I can't believe the police found you before I did." "That's probably because you never tried to look for her," Tammy said angrily. She snatched the baby from my arms and placed him on the ground outside. "Tammy, she's going to start eating weed again," I said. "It's none of your business what she eats," Tammy hissed. "I'm not going to sleep on the damn couch, bitch. I'll beat your skinny ass. Come on, let's fight right now." "Look at this," Zeke said. "I'm the sexiest guy in the park. I have 2 women fighting over me." Tammy clenched her fists as Bud stepped between us. Guys, family squabbles will have to be postponed. We need to get back to the police station now. The DA wants to hold a press conference." A few minutes later, I stood on camera next to the district attorney, who was blushing and posing for the cameras as he talked about his tireless efforts to find me and how his office was working with the FBI to find me. He said that now, with my help, they will begin to try to track down those who were behind this. As I was brought over to Zeke and Tammy, Tammy continued to move away from me as if she didn't want to be near me. Zeke, on the other hand, constantly tried to hug me at every opportunity. And then he did it. He hugged me, and I smelled his bad breath. His unshaven cheek scratched my skin. I hit him, and several FBI agents came over to investigate the situation. The FBI guys took me in for questioning. They asked me all sorts of questions about where I had been and whether I could identify any of the people who had kidnapped me. I repeated the same thing over and over again. I didn't see anyone because I always had a bag on my head. They kept me in the basement in the dark until I escaped. I don't remember the voices because there were too many of them. I just wanted to be left alone. The 2 agents left the room but remained standing outside, and I could hear their conversation through the crack in the door. "She's probably so afraid of what happened to her that she's traumatized," one said. "Yes, she thinks that if she says something, they will come back for her again. Damn it, we would never have found her. Nobody knew anything. Like her sister said on that stupid TV show, it was like she disappeared in a cloud of smoke. And she's clearly lying to us out of fear," the first guy said again. "Have you seen her tan? She probably just got back from Florida." "Damn it, what about all these jewels? Who kidnaps a person and makes him better? Maybe she wasn't kidnapped at all. Maybe she just ran away and now she's back." "Let's say this will be the official version," said the second guy. "We will tell her family that we are continuing to investigate, but seriously, I have more important things to do. I wish I could take this bracelet as proof. I could cover a big chunk of my mortgage with this." They began to walk away down the corridor, still discussing me. By the time the FBI released me, everyone except Bud and a few other officers had already left. Bud took me to the trailer park again. When we arrived, I tried to open the trailer door, but it wouldn't budge. The strange thing was that the lock on the door never worked. I hit the door as hard as I could, and it opened slightly. Then I realized that Tammy was standing outside the door to keep me out. I heard the sound of a punch, and I was sure that Zeke had just hit my sister. The door opened, and he stepped aside. He looked at me angrily, but noticed Bud outside. "We'll come in the morning to check how you're doing," Bud said. Zeke seemed to take note. "I'll let you leave after you hit me because I know you're out of your mind," Zeke said, looking at me. "You tried to rob me," I said. He looked puzzled. "I am your husband. You belong to me. I can do whatever I want with you. You need to start understanding this now that you're back. Everything will not be the same as before. I'm not going to put up with your antics and your smart mouth anymore." I realized that I was mistaken. All this time I thought that Adam was hiding information about my family from me because he didn't want me to leave him. Now I realized that he knew what was really going on and was trying to protect me. For over 2 years, this man treated me like the most important person in the world, and I ran away from him, assuming the worst, without even giving him a chance to explain himself. I did the stupidest thing I could. We stood there, and I could see Zeke looking at me. He looked me up and down. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head. He wanted my jewelry and anything that could be sold, and he wanted sex. He was clearly tired of my sister, and since he and I were legally married, he would simply put her aside and move on. In a few years, I would become the same as in that dream. I'd turn into another 300-pound trailer park wife with 5 or 6 rambunctious kids and no future. You can sleep on the couch tonight, he said. For now, I will explain everything to your sister. But since you and I are married, tomorrow night you will come back to my bedroom. The walls and doors of the trailer were paper thin. I heard Zeke and Tammy arguing. The argument ended with his usual, because I fucking said so. A few minutes later, I was actually surprised to hear Tammy's voice. Can we still do this? She asked. Yes, from time to time, he said. You know you'll have to fight her to get her to give it to you, she said. Probably just the first few times, he said. After this, she will do as she is told, as always. But she doesn't like it, Tammy said. There's something wrong with her. It always has been. What about now? She asked. What now? He asked again. Can we do this now? She asked, drawing out her words plaintively. They were both full of crap. I loved sex. Adam and I could barely keep our distance from each other. But there was a huge difference between what we did and what they did. Later that night, I heard the bedroom door open. I still couldn't sleep. Tammy desperately tried to convince Zeke that she wanted him. A few seconds after the door opened, I sat up abruptly on the sofa. Zeke, what the hell are you doing? I asked. I just wanted to check on you, he smiled. Stop lying, I said. I'm not as stupid as my sister. You tried to steal my bracelet. No, I didn't try, he said, smiling. He seemed to really believe that his country charm could work. Zeke, this bracelet is worth so much that if it is stolen, you will be charged with grand theft. You'll go to jail for a long time. You can't put your own husband in jail, he smirked. I can, I said. Well, you should think about more than just yourself, he said. This trinket could help your family a lot if you weren't so damn selfish. I bet this thing is worth at least $500. Are you crazy? I said. It costs 20 times more. Well, I'm not a math genius, he said, but I knew it was a lot. The next day, my brother Reb arrived, and naturally he sided with Zeke. He spent a lot of time convincing Tammy not to poison me or beat me to a pulp, and he constantly looked at us with a smile. I felt sick at the thought. The whole family got together, and we had a barbecue of sorts. Everyone kept looking at my bracelet, necklace, and clothes that I had been wearing for 2 days now. When I heard Zeke tell Reb that everything was going to happen tonight, I threw up. Everyone came over to see what happened. I wrapped my arms around my stomach and just cried. I think they decided the food wasn't good for me and left me alone. After the rest of the family left, I sat down on the same brick in front of the trailer and tried to sleep. Are you going to bed, honey? Zeke asked. Not now, I replied. My stomach still hurts. I don't want to throw up on you. Why don't you sleep with Tammy one more night? He grumbled but returned to the bedroom. I waited until they were asleep before I went inside and lay on the couch with the bracelet and necklace tucked into my bra. The next morning, I got up as soon as it was light. Zeke came out of the bedroom and looked at me angrily. Where is the bracelet? He asked. Why do you need it? I asked. I just want to look at it, he said. You know I'm meeting with the Da again this morning, I said. Bud will pick me up at 9. He wants to show the bracelet to his wife. Zeke took the hint. How did it happen that you were kidnapped and you returned with such expensive things? He asked. I just shrugged. Why did you get up so early? He asked. I wanted to go to the store to get some beer for you, I said. I noticed at the barbecue last night that you didn't have much left. This is how a wife should act, he smiled. Can I take the car? I asked. The machine doesn't work, he said. We need a new engine. That's why I thought of pawning your bracelet. This engine will cost a lot more than my disability checks, and we need this car. She hasn't worked for a year. Okay, I'll walk then, I said. Can you ask Tammy to come with me so we can carry 2 packages? Damn it, I'll wake up her lazy ass, he said. I asked him to send Tammy just so he could be sure I'd be back. Tammy didn't say a word on the way to the store. Sister, why do you hate me? I asked. I mean, even when we were kids, you always hated me. Because you always ordered me around, Tammy spat. And everywhere I went, people always compared us, and I always came in second place. Every damn person I've met has told me how beautiful you are, and you just acted like you were better than everyone else. She just looked at me angrily. When our friends went out drinking, I couldn't go. You remained virgin until marriage, so guys didn't want me. You should have been my sister, not my mother. Tammy, maybe I should have found a different way to say it, I said. I did it because I loved you and wanted a better life for you. You were my little sister. I truly believed that you were capable of anything you wanted. You were so special and so much better than those dumb kids. Is it true? She asked. Yes, I said. We walked a little longer before she turned and stopped me. Victoria, what are we going to do about Zeke? She asked. Tammy, Zeke is yours, honey. I'm not interested in him, I said. Victoria, I love Zeke. I have 2 children with him, and I'm pregnant again. But you are my sister, and I have something to tell you. Zeke is going to steal your things and force you to have sex with him. I think he has this idea that he can have 2 women and... She started crying, for real this time. Don't worry, I said. I won't go back there. What about beer? She asked. I just shook my head. Fuck the beer, Tammy. Just stay here for a while and then go home. Tell Zeke I've been kidnapped again. Tell him they were Canadians. Tell him you realized they were Canadian because they kept saying, hey. If they ask you for names, tell them one of them was named Doug Mackenzie. I hugged her and walked further down the road. When I got to the store, I looked around until I found that Chester bastard. Now he was the manager. I took him aside. Hi, Chester, I said. I just came by to warn you before I rat you out. Prison is hard for chubby boys like you. What are you talking about, lady? He asked. Chester, don't you recognize me? I asked. He looked at me and his jaw dropped. Victoria, he asked, why are you talking about prison? Because you arranged my kidnapping, I said. The FBI is looking for whoever did this. I don't know any of them, but I can rat you out. He panicked. He started crying and wailing right in the store. Chester, let's get down to business, I said. If you take me somewhere, I'll let you go. Do you have a car? He simply nodded. We got into his car, an old Buick held together by duct tape and prayers. I had to hold the door to prevent it from opening while driving. I knew the area where we lived and the address, but I didn't know the exact route, so we circled the streets for a long time. And suddenly, I saw our house. I told Chester to drive up to the gate. I went out and went to the gate. That's when this story began. 2 huge guards came out and told us to turn around immediately. I told them that I needed to talk to Adam, and that I wasn't leaving until I talked to him. One of the guards simply took out his mobile phone and started calling the police. I told Chester to leave before he finished the call. When we drove away, I noticed that the house was being unloaded. In the rear mirror, I saw my bed being taken out of the house. It hurt me a lot. Chester drove me downtown to the building where Adam's company was located. The security guard started waving for us to leave, but I stuck my head out of the window and smiled at him. He recognized me from my many visits here since I first came here. He raised the barrier and let us through. Chester remained in the car. I walked in through the back door as I usually did when I visited Adam at work. The last time I was here, I convinced him to make love on his huge table. The guards barely glanced at me as I waved and walked past. I waved to the guys on the factory floor and walked around to the area where I had to wear safety glasses. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor. I nervously walked towards the office. Entering the office, I saw the back of a woman in a business suit. She seemed to be in a hurry. Is he feeling better now, or is he still sick? I asked. What do you care about? She answered without interrupting her actions. I made a mistake, I said. I want to fix her. I didn't expect what happened next. In an instant, so quickly that I would not have believed it if I had not seen it with my own eyes, she straightened up, threw down the papers, and pinned me against the wall. And how are you going to do this? She screamed. Her face was distorted with hatred. It was only a few inches from mine, and her hand was squeezing tighter every moment. "Let her go, Angie," Tella said calmly, standing behind us. "He wouldn't want that. He loved her until the very end." "What do you mean, to the end?" I asked. "Victoria, don't you watch the news?" she asked. "Adam is gone. You could have killed him yourself. I warned you that his broken heart couldn't handle it a second time. The day after you left, he died. Angie would probably kill you if she could. I think you may have really loved him after all, so it will be much more painful for you to live with what you did to the person who tried his best to make you happy." She pulled me away from Angie and the wall. "He lived for you, Victoria," she said, "and in the end he died for you. Go away, Victoria, you are poison." I left the building through the same door I entered through. Chester was waiting for me with the engine running. "We go back to the park and you are free," I told him. "Are you really going back there?" he asked incredulously. "Why not?" I asked. "Where else should I go?" I got out of the car and went into the trailer. I'm just in time to hear Zeke yell at Tammy. "What the hell do you mean she was kidnapped again?" he shouted. "Some Canadians took her away," Tammy whined. "How did you know they were Canadian?" he asked. "Because they kept saying hey," Tammy said. "And one of them didn't have a gun, but a hockey stick." "Here's a beer," I said, entering the room. "What happened to the Canadians?" Zeke asked, not taking his eyes off Tammy. "Relax, Zeke," I said. "They are just friends. They were playing a joke on me." "Where is the bracelet?" he asked. "I hid it somewhere safe," I said. "It still doesn't suit you. I think a handbag would suit you better." "You're back with your smart jokes," he warned. "I'd rather be smart than dumb," I said. He became even more angry. "Where is the bracelet?" he asked. "Why do you care, Zeke?" I asked. "It's not yours, and you won't have it." "You selfish bitch," he shouted. "We felt better when we thought you were dead." "Yes, I think I'd be better off dead too," I said. "At least then I would be with someone who loves me." "Looks like I'll have to teach you a lesson about where a woman belongs," he said. "Go ahead, Zeke," I said, falling to the floor. "Beat me. You can't make me feel worse than I already feel. I really hope you kill me. Maybe then I will find out if there is life after death. I really need to make peace with one person." "Are you talking about the other guy?" Zeke shouted. "You slept with another man while I was here alone waiting for you." "Every time I got the chance," I said. "You'd love to see this." I rolled my eyes and ran my tongue across my lips. Zeke then became completely angry. "I can't believe you cuckolded me. Zeke's wife shouldn't have sex with other men." Zeke, you had sex with my sister before I left," I reminded him. "This is different," he said. "A man must cast his net wide. It's in the Bible." "Where?" I asked. "In the chapter about casting nets and fishing," he muttered. "You know, the one with Jesus as a fisherman and all that." "You're clearly an expert on all sorts of nonsense," I said. He became even more angry and swung his hand at me to hit me. I just looked at him and braced myself for impact. The hand swung, and I instinctively closed my eyes, but no blow came. I looked up and saw Adam holding Zeke's hand just a few millimeters from my face. "I'm that Canadian, hey," Adam said. "You're the one she cheated with, right?" Zeke shouted. "Tammy, get the gun," Zeke shouted. "You don't have any ammo, Zeke," Tammy said. "Just bring the damn gun," Zeke shouted. "You're not dead?" I asked, smiling at Adam. "No," he said. "The body just wanted to scare you, making you think that we are no longer there. You didn't report me?" "No," I said. "I told you that you can trust me. I love you, Adam. Sometimes I act stupid. I should have talked to you, I thought." "Did you think I was trying to keep you away from your family?" he asked. "So it was." "Yes, now I understand why," I said. "Did you know they lied in that video? They didn't care about me. Nobody was looking for me at all." "I was looking," he said. "I've been looking for you all my life." "Oh, someone is definitely going to get something today," I said with a wink. "Stay still," Zeke said. He tried to raise the gun, but Adam instantly snatched it from his hands. Zeke stood there looking like a cartoon character, wondering where his weapon had gone. Tammy laughed out loud, and that was the last straw for Zeke. He clenched his fists and lunged at Adam, but Adam simply stepped aside and Zeke slammed hard into the trailer door, which wouldn't lock. Zeke flew out of the trailer and landed awkwardly on his back right on the very brick we were using for a step. "Tammy, call an ambulance," he shouted. "Bye, Tam," I said. "I'm going home." "But this is your home," she said. "You're married to Zeke." "No there," I said. "You need to start reading Zeke's Bible. A woman's place is next to her man." I took Adam's hand and kissed it. "Can we go home now?" I asked. He smiled. "We'll have to live in the camp for now," he said. "All the furniture is already on the truck heading to North Carolina. I'll call to have them returned, but I'll have to spend a few days without furniture." Zeke was still screaming when we got into the car and drove away. "Bring back my wife, you fucking Canadian bastard. Tammy, call an ambulance. The phone's not working, Zeke," she said. "Well, then run down the street and—" he began. "Zeke, I love you," she said, "but I'm pregnant and I'm too fat to run anywhere." They were still screaming when we left. Everyone got what they wanted, except, of course, for Zeke, who got what he deserved. I got Adam. We had our own child as soon as I stopped taking the pills. Adam and I lived happily ever after. Zeke gave me a divorce, but he had to do it to marry Tammy. They had 3 children, and marriage was the only way to save the family. He really needed Tammy more than she needed him. When he fell on that brick, he injured his spine. The good news is that he is now truly disabled. Unfortunately, because his injury occurred at home and not at work, his pension was reduced by 1/3. Tammy still loves Zeke. To somehow make ends meet, she got a job at a club frequented by men who love fat women. The problem is that Tammy has always loved the thing, and since Zeke can't have sex anymore, she started bringing clients home to do it. Zeke hates it, but he can't help it. Tella, to her surprise, finally gave up on Adam and married Damon. They still work for us, but not in the house. Adam was going to remove the security system from the house because we no longer needed it. But I told him to wait with it. I had a feeling that our daughter would be a little wild, and we might have to kidnap her sometimes. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the next one.